Imagine you have this like high definition IMAX level movie playing in your head.
Oh, yeah, like a fully nuanced cinematic masterpiece.
Exactly. Complete with a sweeping score. And you are just totally ready to blow everyone's mind with this amazing thought. But when you actually open your mouth to describe it, you realize you only have the vocabulary to draw a stick figure.
It is, well, it's a universally humbling experience, honestly. And it usually happens when the stakes feel incredibly high. Your brain just abruptly severs that connection between your deep internal understanding and your external ability to actually articulate it.
Yeah, and that frustrating disconnect, it isn't just a language problem, it's actually a global crisis problem. So, welcome to today's Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today is to figure out exactly why our brains freeze when we try to talk about massive, overwhelming issues, specifically climate change. And we're going to explore the exact psychological hack to fix it.
It's a really good one, too.
We are drawing from a few sources today, but it's all anchored by this fascinating case study from the Easy English podcast. It's titled Communicating Climate Change, Emma's English Learning Journey.
And, on the surface, the source material just presents this straightforward narrative about a woman trying to improve her second language.
It's a standard learning story, right?
Right, but when you look at the mechanics of what she actually does, it turns into this absolute masterclass on how simple communication, even deeply imperfect communication, can bypass our collective anxiety and actually create tangible change.
So let's introduce you to the subject of this case study. Her name is Emma. She's a 30-year-old marketing assistant working for a small company.
Just a normal, everyday professional.
Exactly. Outside of work, she loves hiking, being outdoors, and every single evening she sits down for some solitary study time to learn English, because her ultimate career goal is to work with international clients.
So she's putting in that grueling, solitary work.
Oh, totally. I think anyone who has tried to master a new skill can relate to that grind.
She definitely has the motivation.
Yeah.
But as we'll see, motivation alone doesn't prevent the cognitive roadblock we're about to discuss.
Right, because to truly understand the breakthrough Emma eventually engineers for herself, we first have to examine her moment of total failure.
The breaking point.
Yeah. It's a Tuesday evening. Emma is sitting in her weekly English conversation class. The teacher stands up, smiles, and writes this massive loaded question on the whiteboard. What is the biggest environmental challenge facing our world today?
I mean, that is the linguistic equivalent of being thrown into the deep end of the pool with weights on your ankles.
Seriously. So the room goes quiet for a second, but then the other students just start jumping in, and they're rattling off these massive, heavy concepts.
Like what?
Like, one student tackles plastic pollution in the oceans, another starts dissecting deforestation, someone else brings up industrial air pollution. They are pulling out all the high-level jargon. And then the teacher looks directly at Emma and asks for her thoughts. Now, the text makes it very clear that Emma cares deeply about this subject. In her native language, she consumes heavy literature on the climate.
So she has the knowledge.
She has a sophisticated IMAX-level understanding of the crisis.
But the output mechanism just completely jams.
So it completely freezes. All that complex vocabulary vanishes. And the absolute best she can quietly muster in front of the entire class is, and I quote, "I think climate change is very bad for everyone."
Ouch.
Yeah. She leaves the class feeling deeply defeated. Not for lack of ideas, but just a total lack of tools.
What's fascinating here is the underlying neuroscience of that exact moment.
Okay, let's get into that.
Because it has absolutely nothing to do with Emma's intelligence or even her base level of English retention. It is entirely about the gap between her complex internal thoughts and the external tools she currently has available. When we face a multifaceted existential problem, like global warming, our brains naturally feel this desperate need to match the complexity of the problem with equally complex language.
Yeah, we feel this pressure to sound like, I don't know, atmospheric scientists just to be granted permission to enter the conversation.
Exactly. And when you realize you do not have that scholarly vocabulary at your fingertips, whether you're operating in a second language or even your native tongue, the cognitive load just becomes too heavy.
It's just too much all at once.
Right. So the amygdala, which is the part of your brain that processes fear and threat, it perceives this high-stakes social situation as a literal danger.
Like a physical threat.
Essentially, yes. It hijacks the system, pulling resources away from the prefrontal cortex, which is where you actually formulate language and logical thought.
Wow.
The brain just short-circuits to protect you from the perceived social threat of sounding inadequate.
Think about your own life for a second listening to this. Have you ever felt this exact type of paralysis?
Oh, I'm sure everyone has.
Maybe you're sitting in this high-stakes strategy meeting at work, or you're entering a new field of study, and you just don't quite know the insider acronyms yet.
Yeah, the jargon.
You have a great idea, but because you can't wrap it in the perfect corporate speak, you just sit there in silence. You decide that if you can't say it flawlessly, you just won't say it at all.
Which is such a tragic loss of human capital.
Mhm.
And it's exactly the trap Emma is caught in as she walks home from her conversation class.
But Emma's reaction to this failure is what makes her case study so compelling. Because she couldn't express the overwhelming complexity of the problem, she was forced to radically pivot her strategy.
She had to try something new.
She decides to focus entirely on actionable solutions.
Yeah.
So the following Saturday, she walks into her local library and completely bypasses the grammar and syntax books.
Interesting.
She heads straight to the environment section. She borrows a book called The Future We Choose by Christiana Figueres and Tom Rivett-Carnac.
Oh.
And the source highlights that she's drawn to its hopeful tone. It doesn't paralyze the reader with doomsday scenarios. It actually outlines practical, tangible actions for individuals and businesses.
So she is intentionally shifting her focus from the paralyzing macro problem to these active micro solutions.
Yes. She also picks up No One is Too Small to Make a Difference by Greta Thunberg. And the core message there really hits Emma hard, that every person matters and small actions aggregate into major shifts.
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
Right, and Emma starts evaluating her own life through this lens. She realizes, wait, I already carry a reusable water bottle. I diligently turn off the lights when I leave a room.
She chooses to walk to the local shops instead of driving.
Exactly. She is already living these positive choices. She just needs to learn how to vocalize them.
She possesses the behavioral foundation. The new task is simply mapping the vocabulary onto her existing reality.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, though, because I'm struggling to see the actual mechanism here.
What do you mean?
Well, Emma just suffered a localized total system failure in class, right? She couldn't string together a basic sentence about the environment.
Right.
And her solution to this is to go to the library and check out dense books on climate change written by global diplomats and activists in her second language. Shouldn't reading Christiana Figueres require a more cognitive load than answering a basic whiteboard question?
It seems completely counterintuitive, I know. You would totally expect that tackling Greta Thunberg in a foreign language would just trigger another amygdala hijack.
Exactly.
But the practical, action-oriented framing of these specific books actually bypasses the brain's threat response.
Wait, how does reading about a global crisis lower the brain's threat response?
Because it breaks the paralysis of abstraction.
Okay.
Think about it. When a teacher asks you to define the biggest environmental challenge, your brain attempts to scan the entire globe, sort through meteorology, geopolitics, economics, and then translate all of that into English.
Yeah, that's a lot.
The sheer volume of abstract data causes the crash. But Thunberg's message and the specific vocabulary Emma is extracting from it revolves around physical, tangible items. A water bottle, a light switch, a bicycle.
So she is shrinking the abstract terror of the global climate crisis down to the physical dimensions of her own living room.
Precisely. In cognitive psychology, processing tangible nouns and physical actions requires significantly less mental bandwidth than processing abstract concepts.
That makes a lot of sense.
Emma isn't starting from scratch and trying to build a whole philosophy of climate change. She's simply learning the labels for the objects she already holds in her hand.
So intellectually understanding that you need to focus on local solutions is one thing, but there's a physical and neurological bridge you have to build to actually vocalize those solutions under pressure.
Yeah, the application part.
How did Emma train her brain to cross that bridge?
By forcing the abstract vocabulary to become deeply, intensely personal.
Let's talk about how she does that. She picks up a textbook called English Vocabulary in Use. She's looking at standard environmental terms, right? Renewable energy, biodiversity, carbon footprint, sustainability.
The usual suspects.
But she refuses to do the standard exercise of just memorizing the glossary definitions. Instead, she writes sentences that are explicitly autobiographically about her own life.
Oh, I love this.
She writes, I recycle glass and paper. She writes, I want to reduce my carbon footprint by walking to the store.
That is a phenomenal application of what psychologists call the self-reference effect.
The self-reference effect, what is that exactly?
Well, the self-reference effect is a memory phenomenon where people are significantly more likely to remember information if they can somehow relate it to themselves.
Oh, because it's about me, so I care more.
Exactly. The brain naturally prioritizes data that is relevant to our own survival, identity, or daily routine. By tying a foreign concept to her own kitchen, she makes the vocabulary neurologically sticky.
And she takes this a step further into physical action, too.
How so?
She goes on these morning walks and listens to an audio program called Effortless English. But she doesn't just passively listen.
Passive listening is where a lot of people get stuck.
Right, but after every lesson, she hits pause, and she forces herself to speak out loud for 2 straight minutes about an environmental topic.
Just out in public.
Yeah. Why forests matter or how to reduce food waste, just walking down the street talking to herself.
Which is lowering what linguists call the affective filter. When you practice alone, out loud, you are building the physical muscle memory of speaking without the social anxiety of being judged by a classroom.
My absolute favorite part of her strategy, though, is how she hijacks standard language exercises.
Oh, the short stories.
Yes. She reads a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners. These are just basic, everyday fictional stories, but she forces a connection to the environment after every single chapter.
That is so clever.
If the story is about a quiet little village, her verbal summary focuses on how the villagers protect their local nature. If the story is about a family having dinner, she practices a monologue about how those parents should teach their children to recycle their food packaging.
She is essentially gamifying her own learning.
It's the difference between trying to memorize a map of a massive city you have never visited versus drawing a map of your own neighborhood.
Right, because you already know it.
You're attaching the new, unfamiliar information to the exact roads you already walk every single day.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychological brilliance of this method is undeniable. By weaving this vocabulary into her daily routines and her physical habits, she completely removes the fear of making a mistake.
Yeah, because she's the expert on her own life.
Exactly. She is no longer trying to recite an academic paper on atmospheric degradation. She is just describing her own life. And nobody, not even her own internal critic, can tell her that she is describing her own life wrong.
You are the undisputed expert on your own daily routine.
And this is really the ultimate hack for learning anything. Whether you're trying to learn a language, master a complex new software program at work, or understand a heavy scientific concept.
Ground it in reality.
Yes. If you can tie the new information directly to your existing reality, to things you already care about and physically interact with, your brain stops treating the information as a foreign threat. It starts treating it as a useful, everyday tool.
So we have Emma building this customized, highly personal toolkit. But eventually, all of this solitary practice, talking to herself on walks, summarizing short stories in her room, it has to collide with the real world. She has to test the system.
The transition from the laboratory to the field.
Right. And the source material highlights 3 escalating wins for Emma that prove how incredibly effective this strategy is, even when the communication itself isn't flawless.
What's the first one?
It starts small, in a city park. Emma is sitting on a bench, reading one of her environmental books. A tourist walks by, notices the cover, and strikes up a conversation. He asks her, "What do you think ordinary people can do to help the environment?"
Which is a beautiful echo of the exact prompt that paralyzed her on the whiteboard.
Well, the very same one. But this time, the amygdala doesn't hijack her brain.
Because she's ready.
She uses her practiced self-referential sentences. She looks at the tourist and says, "We can recycle. We can save water. We can use reusable bags. We can walk or ride bicycles when possible."
Simple, effective.
The tourist smiles and tells her he loves her answer because it is highly, quote, realistic.
That external validation is the proof of concept she needed. She communicated a solution, and it was received perfectly.
So, with that proof of concept, the stakes escalate. Emma joins an English discussion group.
Okay, stepping it up.
The topic of the week is how communities can protect the environment. At first, she notes that the old anxiety starts creeping back in.
That's natural.
But she pushes through, raises her hand, and using her clear, personalized vocabulary, she suggests that local schools should teach recycling, and communities should organize neighborhood cleanups.
And how did they react?
The result. Another student actually goes out of their way to praise her for how clearly she articulated her ideas.
The momentum is building. The physical repetition of the vocabulary has completely overridden the anxiety response.
Which brings us to the final test, where the stakes are strictly professional. At her marketing job, her manager announces a new corporate initiative. The company wants to become more environmentally friendly, and they are asking all employees for ideas.
The big leagues.
The text notes that a few months prior, Emma would have stayed completely quiet and let the moment pass her by. But this time, she volunteers.
What does she suggest?
She suggests using less printer paper. She suggests replacing the disposable cups in the break room with reusable mugs. She suggests implementing policies for turning off computers after work and adding recycling bins to all the offices.
Notice how every single suggestion is a physical, tangible noun or action. Mugs, paper, computers.
And the company loves it. They actually implement her ideas the very next month.
Wow.
Emma writes in her journal about how proud she is, noting the incredible shift from being terrified to speak to sharing ideas that actively move the needle at her company.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at the sociological impact of this story, Emma isn't just passing a language test anymore.
No, not at all.
She literally changed her company's environmental footprint. How did her basic, simple sentences achieve what complex scientific jargon so often fails to do?
Right. So what does this all mean? Why did the reusable mug pitch work when a pitch about corporate carbon mitigation strategies might have failed completely?
Because complex jargon in activism often acts as a gatekeeper.
A gatekeeper.
Yeah. When we use massive, complicated phrasing, we might feel like we sound smart, but we are actively alienating the people listening to us. We make the problem seem so incomprehensibly large that nobody feels qualified to help.
We inflict that same paralysis on them that Emma felt in the classroom. We trigger their cognitive overload.
Exactly that. When you tell a mid-level manager, we need to fundamentally restructure our anthropogenic carbon offsetting paradigms, their brain just shuts down.
They completely zone out.
They zone out because they don't have the tools to engage with that level of abstraction. But when Emma says, let's buy reusable mugs and put a recycling bin by the printer, people immediately respond with, I understand that. I can do that today.
Yeah.
By using simple, accessible English, her ideas had absolutely zero barrier to entry.
The insight here is that simple language isn't a crutch to people who don't know the big words. Simple language is actually the most effective strategic tool for driving corporate and community change.
Perfection is the enemy of action. As the source material points out so beautifully, conversations create awareness, awareness inspires action, and action creates change.
It's a chain reaction.
But that entire chain reaction dies immediately if the very first step, the conversation, is misunderstood or makes the listener feel excluded. Simple language carries incredibly powerful, world-changing messages precisely because it invites everyone to participate.
It strips away the exclusivity. It says, you don't need a PhD to help save the planet. You just need to know how to turn off a light switch and talk to your neighbor about it.
Micro actions paired with micro vocabulary. That is how the movement actually grows.
Which brings us to the core lesson of this deep dive. Whether you are actively trying to learn a new language, whether you're trying to advocate for climate action at your job, or if you're just trying to navigate any complex, overwhelming situation in your life, you do not need a master's degree level of vocabulary to make a meaningful contribution.
You really don't.
You do not have to wait until your thoughts are flawlessly structured to start participating in the solution.
The stick figure drawing is infinitely more useful than the IMAX movie that nobody else ever gets to see.
That is so true. The source material actually leaves us with a challenge, and I want to pass it directly on to you listening right now.
Oh, the speaking challenge.
Yeah. Try answering these two questions out loud today. Even if you're just sitting alone in your car or walking the dog, what does climate change mean to you? And what small physical actions do you take in your daily life?
Do it in simple sentences.
Use the tangible nouns. Hear yourself speak the answers out loud and feel how much lighter the cognitive load is.
This raises an important question, though.
What's that?
Well, the case study focuses heavily on Emma using simple language to cross national borders, right? Speaking with international clients or tourists. But what if we took this exact same framework and applied it closer to home?
Applied it how? Like in our own neighborhoods?
Think about the intense political and cultural divides we currently face within our own communities, especially when discussing a crisis like climate change.
Oh, it gets so toxic.
We spend so much time shouting past each other, using highly polarized, weaponized jargon to prove who is right and who is wrong.
Yeah, we try to sound like the ultimate authority.
Right. What if we embraced simple, clear, imperfect communication without feeling the need to sound like an unassailable scholarly expert when talking to our own neighbors?
That's a huge shift.
If exclusionary jargon is harming the climate movement by gatekeeping participation, could stripping away the academic posturing actually bridge the divides in our own backyards?
Man, if we stopped trying to win the argument with unapproachable concepts and just started talking about the local parks, the community cleanups, and the reusable mugs,
Exactly.
that is a powerful framework to view our own communities through. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep learning, keep tying new knowledge to your own daily life, and keep speaking up even when you don't have the perfect words.
Remember that every small action matters.
Because sometimes all it takes to start changing the world is having the courage to just draw the stick figure.